How do you build a culture of empathy? Okay, this first one is a good one. It's probably, maybe, possibly, I think, yes, the most important one. You risk vulnerability. Now, this one is really vital in every way. What I mean about vulnerability is really quite simply telling the truth about yourself as often as possible and as boldly as possible. We are very often afraid to do that for the simple reason that we will be shamed or condemned or shunned or told that we're not right, we're not okay, we're bad, go stand in the corner. That kind of judgment. We also don't do it because for centuries now, vulnerability has been framed as weakness rather than strength. What Amy just said about empathy seeming like a soft thing. We have to revise our ideas of the ways we think about the soft things like empathy and vulnerability and love if we're ever to change the world, if we're ever to create a more compassionate world. And it begins right here with your own capacity to tell the truth about who you really are. Not who are you really? Empathy, vulnerability lives in that leap, that moment where you speak the true sentence, where you dare to say, you dare to sort of slip out from behind the facade. I know it's hard to trust that, but what I can tell you, and I teach a lot of workshops, I teach a lot of writing workshops, this is always the first question that comes up. How can I write about myself? Even in fiction, people are afraid to write those true things. How do I write about myself? And I say, well, what are you afraid of? They say that I'll be condemned, people will judge me, people won't like me. And the only thing I can say is, listen, I've gone a little further down that trail, and I can promise you that is not going to be the main thing that happens. There might be some people, when you risk vulnerability, who will reject you, who will shun you, who will scorn you. Those are not the people you want in your life. Most people will say, that's right, clap. Most people will say, thank you, because me too. I just got chills when I said that, because this is something that happens to me over and over and over and over again in my writing. Every time I risk anything in my writing, which is pretty much every time I write, people come to me and say, thank you. I didn't know that I thought I was alone. And not only do they see they aren't the only one, but all the other people who step forward and say, me too, me too, me too. That's the powerful work of vulnerability. I remember, and not just, one of the things I want to say is this is something, here again, the horizontal thing, this is something I learn over and over again. Writing is always scary to me. Telling the truth about myself is always scary. I remember when I was writing Wild, and for those of you who don't know, Wild is about my 1,100-mile hike on the Pacific Crest Trail in the summer of 1995, which I took when I was 26. It was a wilderness adventure. It was really hard. It was also a healing journey. I was on that, went on that long walk because my mother had died very suddenly of cancer at 45. She was my only parent. And honestly, I didn't know how I could live without my mom. I couldn't live without my mom. I pretty much self-destructed. And that journey on Wild, that I took, that I wrote about on Wild, was the thing that brought me back to myself and saved me. And when I was writing about that journey, I had to tell the whole truth. And there was this point in my writing where I was writing about, it was my mother's 50th birthday. I was hiking, and I was remembering what I had done a few years before on her 46th birthday. And that is, I had, with my siblings and my stepfather, spread my mother's ashes in a little flower plot we made in the woods where I'd grown up in northern Minnesota. And I was scattering those ashes that were more like little pebbles, and I came to this point where I just had the last little bit in my hand, and I could not let them go. They were the last material aspect of my mother, the last bit of her in the physical realm. And I couldn't drop them and let them go into the dirt. I couldn't let them go into the wind. So what I did is I put them to my mouth and I swallowed them. See? Okay? So some of you said, oh, like, you know what? You did what I did when I wrote that sentence. It was as if I had been electrocuted. I jumped from the computer, and the first thought that came to my mind is, that's too much. You will delete that line before the book is published because it's too much. And what I did in the next hour is I realized, no, this is the work of writing. This is the work of empathy in the world. It is to say the sentence that you are the most afraid to say, because other people need to hear it. And that's exactly what happened when that book was published. I have talked to thousands of people. I have received thousands of emails, and they all say the same thing. I thought I was the only one. I can't believe you wrote that. I can't believe you did that. And I'm like, well, why can't you believe I did that? Because you did it too. You know, they're saying, I did that too. I thought I was the only one. And that, that's the power of vulnerability, is we say, here is actually who we are. And when you do that, what happens is you go from 1 to 2 to 10 to 10,000, and you say, this is what our existence is about. And I can hold you compassionately in your suffering, in your pain, in your truth, in your experience. Vulnerability allows us to see each other more clearly, to recognize ourselves in people who we assume are different from us.